The termination email did not even contain my name in the salutation line. It was just a cold two-sentence paragraph centered in the middle of a stark white browser window. It read, "Your services are no longer required, effective immediately. Please refrain from accessing company systems." There was no phone call from human resources, no exit interview, and no explanation whatsoever. Just like that, 18 years of my life, my late-night engineering marathons, and the permanent nerve damage in my right wrist were wiped clean from the corporate ledger with a single click from an executive who probably could not explain what an application programming interface was, if his life depended on it. That was 6 weeks ago. Now, at 48 years old, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the afternoon, eating stale cereal from a coffee mug and staring at a laptop screen with 3 missing keycaps. The sweatpants I wore had smelled like deadline panic and unwashed disappointment for 3 days straight. Every job posting I clicked through on the local tech boards read like a sick parody. Tech companies were all searching for 25-year-old rockstar developers with 15 years of cloud infrastructure experience who were eager to work 80 hours a week in exchange for cheap ping-pong tables and stock options that would likely be diluted into oblivion. I slammed the lid of my battered laptop down with a hollow thud. My phone vibrated on the laminate countertop. I ignored it, assuming it was another automated recruiter email, offering a temporary contract at half my previous salary. But then my eyes caught the glowing sidebar headline on a financial news website I frequently scrolled. The red breaking news ticker made my pulse spike. A $650 million tech acquisition was suddenly called off during final due diligence due to a catastrophic intellectual property ownership crisis. I blinked, leaned closer to the screen, and read the paragraph 3 times. The article did not name the specific internal assets involved, but it cited an anonymous source close to the buyer, stating that the seller had failed to verify clear title to the core software stack. The seller was Cortex Solutions, my former employer. The very enterprise that had tossed me out like garbage 6 weeks before their long-awaited, champagne-soaked payday. To understand how Cortex Solutions arrived at this precipice, you have to understand the transition that took place over the last 5 years. Cortex had started as a small, tight-knit group of passionate engineers working out of a rented warehouse. We survived on cold pizza, cheap energy drinks, and the shared dream of building the most efficient distributed database cluster in the industry. I was the third employee hired, dedicating my life to designing the core architecture. But as our customer base expanded and our revenue grew, the original founders decided to cash out, selling their interest to a predatory venture capital firm. The first thing the new board of directors did was install Alistair Caldwell as chief executive officer. Alistair was 39 years old, possessed a perfectly tailored wardrobe, and spoke in a constant stream of empty corporate jargon about synergy, leverage, and maximizing shareholder value. He had no technical background, yet he carried himself with the supreme arrogance of a man who believed spreadsheet manipulation was the highest form of human intelligence. To Alistair, the engineering department was not the engine of the company. It was a massive, bloated cost center that needed to be pruned. Over 3 years, he systematically dismantled our employee benefits, liquidated our pension matching program, and instituted a culture of high-pressure hustle that forced developers to work 80-hour weeks just to keep their jobs. My role as lead systems architect made me a primary target. I was earning a comfortable senior-level salary, which Alistair viewed as an unnecessary drain on his quarterly budget sheets. He wanted to replace senior engineers with cheap, inexperienced graduates who would not question his demands. I watched as my colleagues were pushed out one by one, replaced by offshore contractors who wrote fragile, buggy code that my remaining team had to debug in late-night emergency sessions. When the acquisition talks with Vanguard Dynamics began, Alistair escalated his cost-cutting measures, desperate to inflate the company net profit margins on paper, to secure a massive personal equity bonus from the merger. My termination was the final phase of his payroll reduction plan. 6 weeks before the scheduled deal closure, Alistair executed a silent, sweeping layoff that targeted the remaining high-earning veterans. He assumed that since the core database platform was already built and operational, he no longer needed the expensive architects who created it. He believed he could run the platform on autopilot using junior staff and offshore support. I was cut without a single word of appreciation, denied my quarterly performance bonus, and escorted from the building by security guards as if I were a corporate spy. I went home with 18 years of my life packed into a single cardboard box, wondering how I would survive in an industry that had suddenly declared me obsolete. Now, staring at the breaking news of the collapsed merger, I realized Alistair corporate cost-cutting had run directly into a concrete wall of his own making. My phone buzzed again, vibrating aggressively against the kitchen counter. This time, it was a direct text message from Toby Finch, a junior back-end engineer I had mentored for the last 3 years. The message was rushed, filled with typos that betrayed his panic. It read, "They are losing their minds on the executive floor. Something is wrong with the original platform foundation code. Please tell me you still have your old architecture logs." I stared at the glowing text, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I did not text Toby back immediately. Instead, I stood up, walked over to my desk drawer, and pulled out a dusty black external hard drive. It contained a local mirror of the foundational codebase from 7 years ago, backed up before legal instituted the mandatory corporate wiping policies that forced us to destroy our local development environments. My fingers flew across the keyboard by pure muscle memory as I booted up my terminal and began pulling up the legacy repositories. Line by line, directory by directory, I began digging through the digital bedrock of the platform I had built from scratch. Everything looked standard until I reached the core load distribution module. Tucked deep inside the initialization logic was a hidden inline comment left 7 years ago. The comment read, "Patent application filed personally per Gideon instructions. Better safe than sorry." A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. I remembered that winter 7 years ago with vivid clarity. Cortex Solutions was undergoing its first major hostile restructuring, and Gideon Hawk, our brilliant, fiercely paranoid vice president of engineering, was fighting a losing battle against the board of directors. Gideon had seen Alistair Caldwell and his venture capital vultures coming from a mile away. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Gideon had barged into my claustrophobic cubicle, throwing a thick manila folder onto my desk, hard enough to knock over my cold cup of coffee. He had looked around nervously, ensuring no executive handlers were lingering in the hallway, before leaning down with his voice barely above a harsh whisper. "Lawrence, you are filing this patent application today," Gideon had said flatly, pointing directly at the signature lines near the bottom of a United States Patent and Trademark Office disclosure document. I had laughed nervously, assuming it was some kind of elaborate corporate joke. "Gideon, this is core research logic for our next-generation distributed cluster framework. Corporate legal and compliance will throw a massive fit if I file anything without their internal review team signing off on it first." Gideon had grabbed my shoulder, his grip surprisingly iron-tight. "Listen to me very carefully, Lawrence," he urged, his gray eyes flinty with intense focus. "Alistair and his venture capital vultures are not here to build a sustainable engineering enterprise. They are here to fatten up the carcass, strip out every ounce of equity, and sell the remaining husk to the highest bidder. When they decide to sell, they will step on your neck, claim your blood and sweat as their own corporate genius, and throw you into the street without a single penny of severance. You wrote every single line of this load distribution mathematics on your own personal laptop on weekends before they updated the blanket employee intellectual property assignment agreements. You own this invention." He had reached into his coat pocket and handed me a cashier check for $850 to cover the filing fees out of his own pocket. "You file this under your personal legal name, Lawrence Vance, using your home residential address as the primary assignee. No corporate co-authors, no executive credit lines, and absolutely no internal corporate routing. Under federal patent law, specifically Section 261 of Title 35 of the United States Code, patent rights vest strictly in the individual inventor, unless a valid, explicit written assignment is formally recorded with the Patent Office. This is your hurricane insurance, Lawrence. Smart engineers do not buy insurance after the roof blows off in a storm. They buy it before the sky turns gray. At the time, I had assumed Gideon was suffering from acute executive burnout and chronic paranoia. But I respected him too much to argue. I signed the paperwork, submitted the independent filing, paid the registration fees, and promptly forgot about the entire matter as the daily grind of 70-hour workweeks, endless bug tickets, and corporate gaslighting swallowed my life whole. Gideon was pushed out of the company 6 months later, and I never spoke to him about the patent again. Now, sitting in my quiet apartment 7 years later, I realized Gideon had not been paranoid at all. He had been constructing a reinforced nuclear fallout shelter while the rest of the executive team was busy buying luxury sports cars and planning their post-merger retirement estates. I opened my web browser and navigated directly to the United States Patent and Trademark Office public database. In the search bar, I entered the algorithm parameters and executed the query. The page loaded slowly, the progress bar hanging at 90% before finally popping open. There it was in bold capital letters. Patent US 9,842,150. Title: Adaptive Load Distribution in Decentralized Modular Architectures. I scrolled down to the inventor details, my hand shaking so violently the mouse cursor jittered across the screen. Primary inventor: Lawrence Vance, Assini. Lawrence Vance. There was no corporate assignment recorded, no transfer of ownership, and no corporate license. The central framework of the entire product line that Cortex Solutions was trying to sell to Vanguard Dynamics for $650 million did not belong to the company at all. It belonged to me, the 48-year-old developer sitting in his sweatpants with $18 in his checking account. They had thrown me out to maximize their executive payout margins, completely unaware that the very foundation of their empire was built on land I owned outright. A slow, cold smile spread across my face as the weight of the last 6 weeks of humiliation and despair began to evaporate. I pulled out my phone, located an old contact sheet from 5 years ago, and dialed Gideon Hawk's personal telephone number. He had retired to a quiet coastal town in Florida shortly after being pushed out of Cortex Solutions by Alistair. The line rang 4 times before a gravelly, deeply familiar voice answered, accompanied by the faint background sound of crashing ocean waves and distant seagulls. I was wondering how many years it would take for Alistair to run headfirst into that landmine. Gideon said calmly, without even offering a formal greeting. I let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. "You knew all along? I hoped those greedy corporate suits would get cocky enough to overlook due diligence." Gideon grunted through the receiver. "Tell me, Lawrence, did Alistair fire you before or after he announced the $650 million buyout to the tech press?" "6 weeks before," I replied, my voice tightening with lingering resentment. A 2-sentence automated email from HR. No severance pay, no health insurance continuation, no thank you. Gideon snorted with cold contempt. Classic Alistair move. Clear out the senior engineering talent right before the deal closes so the executive board can split the equity pool among themselves. But he forgot one golden rule of enterprise software. Never kick out the architect who holds the master keys to the vault. "What do you plan to do, Lawrence?" "I do not know, Gideon," I admitted, my hands sweating against the phone casing. "They are going to realize what happened any minute now. Toby Finch already texted me. What should my next step be?" "Listen to me very carefully, Lawrence," Gideon said, his tone turning into cold steel. "Do not answer any direct calls from Alistair. Do not reply to human resources. Do not sign a single piece of paper, no matter how much money they wave in your face. You do not negotiate with corporate vultures when you hold the high ground. You dictate terms. I am texting you the contact details for Diana Sinclair. She is a top-tier intellectual property litigation attorney based in San Francisco. We used to call her the Barracuda during our early engineering days. She eats corporate non-disclosure agreements for breakfast and drinks venture capital blood for lunch. Call her immediately and tell her Gideon sent you." I thanked Gideon, hung up the phone, and immediately dialed the number he sent. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in the high-rise office of Diana Sinclair in downtown San Francisco. Diana was 51 years old, wearing a tailored charcoal suit with sharp lapels and eyes that possessed the chilling focus of a tactical commander. She reviewed my patent documentation, the USPTO grant certificate, and my original employment agreement from 18 years ago. A slow, razor-thin smile spread across her face as she laid the papers down on her mahogany desk. "This is absolute poetry, Lawrence," Diana said, tapping her fountain pen against the glass table. "Your original employment contract predates their updated intellectual property assignment clauses by 3 whole years. Under federal law, Section 261 of Title 35 of the United States Code, patent rights belong exclusively to the named inventor, unless an explicit, unambiguous written assignment was executed and recorded with the Patent Office. You never executed an assignment for this patent. Cortex Solutions has built a $650 million software suite, on top of an algorithm they have zero legal license to use. Every single day they run that software platform, they are committing willful patent infringement under Section 271 of Title 35 of the United States Code." "What is our first move?" I asked, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "We file an official public notice of sole ownership with the Patent Office, and then I send a formal legal notice directly to the General Counsel of Vanguard Dynamics." Diana explained with a sharp glint in her eyes. "We inform them that the seller does not own the core technology they are trying to buy. We warn them that if they proceed with the acquisition and deploy the software, we will file a federal lawsuit for patent infringement, seeking an immediate injunction and treble damages. Let's see how Alistair handles a phone call from his buyer." My phone began ringing at exactly 8:12 the next morning. The caller identification displayed Alistair Caldwell direct line. I let it ring 3 times, taking a slow, deep breath to steady my nerves before clicking the speakerphone button. "Lawrence Vance," I said calmly. "Lawrence, my man," came Alistair's loud, aggressively friendly voice through the speaker. He sounded like a salesman trying to pitch a flooded vehicle with a fresh coat of wax. "I know it has been a few weeks since your departure, Lawrence. I just wanted to reach out personally and say that I deeply regret how cold that administrative automated email came across. Human Resources made a massive miscommunication error on that one, buddy. We value your contributions immensely." I kept my mouth shut, letting the silence hang heavy on the line. "Anyway," Alistair continued, his tone shifting into smooth, rehearsed charm, "we were conducting a routine audit of our intellectual property files for the upcoming transaction with Vanguard Dynamics. We noticed a small clerical oversight regarding an old patent filing for the load balancer module. It looks like your name was accidentally left on the primary inventor line without the corporate assignment endorsement attached. Obviously, it is just a minor administrative glitch from years ago. We have drawn up a quick assignment release document. If you can swing by the office today to sign it, we are prepared to issue you a retroactive severance bonus of $50,000 and offer you an exclusive title as Principal Technical Consultant. Clean everything up, water under the bridge, right?" I stared at the wall, feeling a cold, sharp anger burning through my veins. $50,000 out of a $650 million deal. A breadcrumb thrown from the banquet table to quiet the engineer who built the table. "Alistair," I said, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion, "this call is being recorded for legal documentation purposes. Do not contact me directly again. All future communications regarding patent US 9,842,150 will be handled strictly by my legal counsel, Diana Sinclair." "Wait, Lawrence, hold on," Alistair began, his slick composure faltering. I ended the call and blocked his number immediately. The game had officially begun. The reaction from Cortex Solutions was instantaneous and desperate. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, a courier delivered a frantic letter from Brenda Sharp, the human resources manager at Cortex. The letter accused me of violating company confidentiality, misappropriating internal trade secrets, and threatening legal action unless I surrendered the patent within 24 hours. Diana Sinclair read the letter, snorted with utter amusement, and tossed it directly into her wastebasket. "Standard scare tactic from an executive team that is drowning in terror," Diana said. "They are bluffing with an empty hand. They cannot claim trade secret misappropriation for a publicly published patent. It is a legal impossibility. But Cortex was not finished trying to wiggle out of the trap. The following morning, their legal department sent a follow-up document claiming they had found an old general intellectual property assignment agreement that I had signed during a routine paperwork cycle 5 years ago. Diana examined the document under a magnifying lamp. Within 10 minutes, she pointed out that the digital signature timestamp had been manually altered and backdated. It was a crude, desperate forgery created by Alistair's team to save the deal. Diana immediately drafted a response to Cortex lead counsel. Presenting a forged, backdated document as a valid legal contract is a direct violation of California Penal Code Section 470, she wrote. This document is void ab initio. Any attempt to present this document in a federal court will result in immediate criminal referrals for forgery and fraud. We suggest you advise your client to cease and desist from fabricating evidence. That afternoon, Diana's phone rang. It was Duncan Mercer, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Vanguard Dynamics. He was calling off the record. Diana put the call on speakerphone so I could listen. Miss Sinclair, Duncan Mercer began. We have reviewed the documentation you submitted regarding patent US 9,842,150. Our intellectual property audit team has confirmed that Lawrence Vance is indeed the sole title holder. Cortex Solutions has materially misrepresented their asset portfolio during merger negotiations. We are pausing all transaction discussions with Cortex Executive Board. Furthermore, Vanguard Dynamics would like to invite Mr. Vance to a private confidential conference at our regional headquarters tomorrow morning. We want to discuss an independent, direct licensing framework for his patent architecture, without Cortex in the room. The next day, we were instead summoned to a joint emergency meeting at Cortex headquarters. Alistair Caldwell had begged Vanguard for one final meeting to resolve the dispute, and Vanguard had agreed on the condition that Lawrence Vance and his counsel were present. The main conference room at Cortex Solutions was built to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a panoramic view of the San Francisco Bay, surrounding a 20-foot polished mahogany table. Alistair Caldwell sat across from us, looking haggard with dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. Beside him sat Brenda Sharp and two senior corporate defense attorneys, whose aggressive postures could not hide the sheer panic radiating from their faces. Alistair tried to summon his trademark executive charisma, leaning forward with an uncomfortable, strained smile. Lawrence, thank you for agreeing to sit down with us. I think we can all agree that things escalated far too quickly over the past 48 hours. We are all professionals here. Cortex Solutions built the commercial ecosystem around your load balancing algorithm. It is only fair that we find a mutually beneficial resolution so the deal with Vanguard Dynamics can proceed. One of his attorneys slid a thick folder across the polished table toward Diana. We have drafted a comprehensive settlement agreement, the attorney stated. Cortex Solutions is prepared to offer Mr. Vance a lump sum retroactive compensation package of $500,000 in exchange for the immediate execution of a full patent assignment transfer back to Cortex. I looked down at the paper, $500,000. 6 weeks ago, when I was sitting at my kitchen table calculating how many months I could pay rent before running out of savings, that figure would have seemed like an astronomical fortune. Alistair leaned in, his voice dropping into a desperate whisper. Think about it, Lawrence. $500,000 cash. You can retire comfortably. No long, expensive courtroom battles. Just sign the line and we all walk away winners. I looked Alistair straight in the eyes. The room fell dead silent. 18 years, Alistair, I said quietly. My voice did not tremble. I worked 18 years for this company. I worked 80-hour weeks when we were launching the first cluster. I came into the office at 3 in the morning when the servers crashed. When my mother was undergoing chemotherapy 4 years ago, I coded through the night in her hospital room because you told me the quarterly deadline could not be moved by a single day. And 6 weeks ago, you did not even have the courage to call me into your office. You had an automated system send me a 2-sentence email telling me my services were no longer required so you could shrink payroll costs and boost your personal equity share right before a $650 million buyout. Brenda Sharp shifted uncomfortably in her chair, looking down at her notepad. Furthermore, I continued, your sudden layoff of 15 senior engineers, without warning, was a direct violation of the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, Section 2101 of Title 29 of the United States Code. You failed to provide the mandatory 60 days of advance notice for a mass layoff, thinking we were too weak to fight back. You treated us like broken pieces of office furniture that could be thrown into a dumpster once they served their purpose. You think this is about $500,000 because your entire worldview begins and ends with cash payouts and executive bonuses. But you forgot that software is built by human beings, not spreadsheets. Diana reached into her briefcase, pulled out a single stamped legal document, and slid it calmly across the table, stopping directly in front of Alistair. What is this? Alistair attorney demanded, snatching the paper. That, Diana announced with razor-sharp precision, is a formal notice of an exclusive option agreement executed 2 hours ago between Lawrence Vance and Vanguard Dynamics. Vanguard has officially terminated their acquisition merger agreement with Cortex Solutions due to material breach of contract and fraudulent disclosure. They have instead entered into a direct, exclusive patent licensing arrangement directly with my client. Alistair stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking ghost white. You cannot do this, Alistair gasped, his voice cracking. The entire company framework relies on that patent. Without Vanguard buying Cortex, our valuation drops to zero. The board will destroy me. Then I suggest you prepare your defense for the board, Alistair, Diana replied, coolly, gathering her files. Because under federal law, Lawrence Vance is the sole legal owner of the technology. Vanguard Dynamics is deploying his platform independently. Cortex Solutions no longer has a product, no longer has a buyer, and no longer has a future. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked down at the broken executive. Good luck with your due diligence audit, Alistair, I said. We walked out of the conference room, leaving the corporate vultures to devour each other in the wreckage of their own greed. 3 weeks after the tense confrontation in the glass conference room, the final legal ink dried on my new commercial reality. Vanguard Dynamics executed a master patent licensing agreement for patent US 9,842,150. The comprehensive contract included an upfront licensing fee of $4,500,000 paid directly into my personal bank account, alongside a guaranteed annual royalty rate of 2.5% on all global enterprise deployments utilizing the load distribution architecture. Furthermore, Vanguard Dynamics created a brand new executive position engineered specifically to match my skill set and personal boundaries. Principal Systems Architect and Intellectual Property Advisor. The position came with complete remote autonomy, a generous 6-figure base salary, full health coverage, and a strict 40-hour workweek cap, written directly into my contract by Diana Sinclair. Meanwhile, the systemic fallout at Cortex Solutions was catastrophic, immediate, and completely unrecoverable. As soon as official news broke across major financial channels that the $650 million corporate acquisition had collapsed due to fatal intellectual property defects, Cortex private stock valuation plummeted by 95% in a matter of days. The board of directors launched an emergency forensic investigation into Alistair Caldwell and his executive inner circle. It quickly emerged that Alistair had intentionally concealed the missing patent assignment documentation from the due diligence auditors in a frantic, illegal gamble to rush the acquisition through before the fatal error was uncovered. Within 10 days of the audit findings, the board fired Alistair Caldwell for gross breach of fiduciary duty, securities fraud, and intentional misrepresentation. He was ousted from the building by security guards without a single penny of severance pay. His stock options were completely canceled, and several primary institutional investors filed a massive class action lawsuit against him personally to recover their lost capital. Brenda Sharp and the entire corporate legal team were summarily replaced as the company initiated emergency bankruptcy proceedings to liquidate its remaining physical assets. The company that had dominated the local tech scene was reduced to a cautionary tale of corporate greed and executive incompetence. On a bright, clear Monday morning in early autumn, I stepped into my new private office at Vanguard Dynamics Regional Headquarters overlooking San Francisco Bay. The workspace was spacious, quiet, and bathed in natural sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. There were no noisy ping-pong tables, no hollow corporate slogans plastered across the walls, and no toxic hustle culture. Just a custom mahogany standing desk, a powerful dual-monitor workstation, and an uninterrupted, calming view of the Pacific Ocean horizon. As I set down my fresh ceramic mug of dark roast coffee, my personal mobile phone vibrated softly on the desk. The screen displayed an unknown caller number with a San Francisco area code. A second later, a voicemail notification popped up on the display. It was a 62-second recorded message. I clicked the audio file and listened on speakerphone. "Lawrence, please," came Alistair's voice, hoarse, trembling, and completely stripped of his former arrogant corporate polish. "I am begging you to call me back. The investors are foreclosing on everything I own. My house is being placed under a legal lien, and the Securities and Exchange Commission is opening a formal criminal inquiry. If you could just speak to Vanguard Legal Counsel. Tell them we had an informal verbal agreement years ago. I will sign over whatever percentage of equity you want. Please, Lawrence, you are destroying my entire life." I paused the audio playback, feeling neither burning anger nor vengeful malice, just a profound, quiet clarity. Alistair had spent his entire executive career treating dedicated human beings as disposable numbers on a balance sheet, believing that corporate power and wealthy investors exempted him from basic human ethics and federal law. He had not been destroyed by my legal counterstrike. He had been destroyed by his own unbridled greed and his arrogant assumption that quiet, hard-working people would never stand up to claim what was rightfully theirs. I opened my secure messaging application, selected the audio file, and forwarded the recording directly to Gideon Hawk in Florida with a short text caption. "The storm has officially cleared. Welcome to retirement, my friend." A few seconds later, Gideon replied with a photo of himself sitting on a sunny Florida beach, raising a cold glass of iced tea with a wide, triumphant smile. I tapped the delete icon on my phone screen, permanently purging Alistair's frantic voicemail from my device without saving a backup copy. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow, satisfying sip of the dark roast, and turned toward my dual monitor setup. The code editor on my screen was open, displaying clean, elegant system architecture waiting for my next command. For the first time in 18 years, I was not writing code to enrich a greedy corporate board or inflate an executive bonus pool. I was writing software on my own terms, with complete creative control, and with my name permanently etched into the foundation. I smiled, adjusted my ergonomic chair, and got back to work.